That's probably a good segue into carbon. You know a little bit about that.
I've worked a little bit with it.
So can you talk a little bit about kind of the story behind the fertilizer that you're working on that's coming out, and kind of in layman's terms I've been seeing a lot of things recently about people thinking that it's kind of like a Milorganite product. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of wanted to give you a floor here to kind of explain what it is and yeah.
Sure. Okay, so it's really funny. This is three years ago. My business partner, his name is John Borden. John Borden was working at the farmers market in Market Square in Knoxville, and my wife was pregnant at the time. We would go walk it, and I saw this guy hustling a jar of this black material that was being advertised as like a soil amendment. So I approached him and I said, hey, what's this? And he's like, oh, it's biochar. And I was like, okay, what's biochar? And he gave me a pamphlet. And he said, listen, come down to our lab, and I want to show you some things. I'm going to show you some things we're working on. I want to let you see what it looks like under a microscope. I want to do some experiments, and just so you can see what exactly it does. So I did. I went down, and, the company he worked for, it was crazy. They had over 100 employees. There's lots of really young guys like you and I walking around, and, they're all engineer types and stuff, and chemists everywhere, and I was super overwhelmed and impressed at the same time, right? I'm like, wow, this is so cool. So he started showing me just, biochar in and of itself. It basically just looks like a sponge when you look at it under a microscope. Very honeycomb-like shape. And because it's carbon, it's a really good conductor of electricity. It's one of the best conductors of electricity, depending on the purity. And because of that, it can bond to things that have a charge really easily, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't really understand it then at the time. I just wanted to play with it. So he had started some trials with some trees, and we started recording data on the trees. We almost killed the trees because we didn't know what to do with the biochar, and we were using way too much, and it was sucking everything out of the soil, and the trees were just sick and decrepit and starving and yellow, and we were like, uh-oh. So I got the great idea that as I began to research a little bit more, I had come across a study that showed that it actually slowed the drainage in sand. So you apply the carbon, and the increased porosity would actually slow the infiltration of water through sand. So it would help mitigate things like localized dry spot. Mm-hmm. So I said, I've got an athletic field I maintain that's sand-based.
That's what I was going to get to, is I hope you tell the story about when you first put this all out on the field.
Yep. So we started top dressing it across the field, and it turned the entire field black. And it looked like I had gone out there with a bag of charcoal, crushed it up into a powder, and just spread tons of it out there. Coach walks up to me really early into it, and he was like, Matt, are you sure this is going to be okay? You sure about this, man? This is really black, Matt. You sure about this? I'm like, Coach, don't worry about it. We're going to be fine. He's like, I'm trusting you, Matt, but I'm telling you right now, all right, I'm going to trust you, but that's really black. And we get halfway through it, and he's really stomping out there. Now, Matt, are you sure this is going to be? I'm not sure, Matt. And so we finish it, and the athletic director comes out, and he's like, this has got to be fixed. Like, we got to do something about this. This is going to ruin uniforms. You got to do something. And they are hot. They are really hot. I had to get out of there. I'm freaking out. Mm-hmm. So I leave. I tell him, I said, listen, mow it, water it, mow it, water it. I mean, you can't get water on it fast enough, and you got to get it mowed. And so they mow it, and of course they hit like some sort of, I don't know, apparently there was a screwdriver in the hopper when we were doing it, and he hit it with the reel, and he blew out the reel on it.
Oh, man.
I mean, just the whole thing was a disaster. And he called me, and he said, you got to get back down here right now. And I was like, oh my God, no. And I've really thought about just hanging up and never answering the phone again. And I was like, no, I'm just going to go take my whipping.
Disappearing, moving.
Yeah. So I pull back up and I can see, khakis, white button-up shirts, and ties all standing at the 50-yard line. And I'm just like, oh, man, this is not good. I get out. I walk up. Coach hops off the mower, and he drops his sunglasses, and he smiles. And all you can see are his teeth and his eyeballs. And the rest of his face is as black as coal. And I can't help but laugh. And he's like, Matt, damn it, I think it's going to be all right. As I looked at the grass, and you can't see it anymore. And I ran, and I slid across it. And I went out, and I pointed at my shirt, and we were all high-fiving and stuff. And so that was our first experiment using biochar. And then John, the company he worked for at the time, he monitored the results. And one of the things they paid attention to was like beneficial bacteria and fungi counts, watching how that peaked and then waned. And one of the things we noticed is that we were actually getting sustained performance from our inputs, our NP and K, for longer with just the same amounts. So I told John, because it required a tractor to spread it and a truck to carry it, I said, if you could ever get this into a prill, a fertilizer prill, we got a product we can work with. Fast forward 2 years later, and he calls me and he's like, hey, man, you want to go get some beers? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, all right, come on, we're going over to the Fieldhouse Social. And he pulls out of his pocket like some sort of drug dealer. He's like, hey, man, what do you think of this? And it's got like these very rudimentary type fertilizer prills. And I'm like, yeah, that's it right there. Mm-hmm. So he's got all these analyses and stuff we're looking at, and we're getting really excited, right? And he's like, so, how much do you think we can move? And I was like, I have no idea. I start calling people like, hey, would you be interested in this product? Would you be interested in this product? And so it came out to a number, and I called John and I said, this is the number I think, about what we can move. And he was like, we need to go get another beer. And so we go the next time, and he is drinking really heavily. And he's like, are you sure? And I said, yeah. I mean, this is just one-on-one conversations I've had with people. And he's sweating, and he's panicking, and he's like, all right, let's start a business. And so we did. We went and found money, and we started building our plant in Kentucky.
And that's what you're working on right now then, basically, trying to get everything up and going?
Yeah. So we actually, we ran our first batch material last week.
Okay.
Like I told you, we're working for some high-end organic farmers in Kentucky right now to dial in our machines. It's not a Milorganite. So I'll tell you really simply just a list of the ingredients, okay? So we use biochar. I'll give you a real firm basis. So we use biochar, ammonium sulfate, and chicken litter, and RGS. Basically, it's just like a giant vehicle conduit. We have to have the chicken litter in there to make it all come and hold together. Right. And of course, I'm a big fan of the RGS product, so I wanted a way to get that into a granular form. So that's the basis of it. And then from there, we just wanted to make it cute. So we started playing with higher rates of iron. From what we learned is that the more iron we put into it, the harder it would get. So that would increase our crush strength and, long-term life in a bag. And said, okay, that's good. And then, we wanted to broaden the range of actual nutrients that were applied. And so then, we added a little bit of micronutrients, and then we wanted to add a little bit of potash to it. And so that's how it all came together.
So there are definitely things in there that are going to be, it's soil based because of things like that, like the char and then the RGS and stuff like that. But as far as being anything like Milorganite, it's not really, there's nothing biosolid in there or anything like that. So it's not really that kind of product.
No, there's no human waste. It is all recycled material. So, the char is from the renewable energy sector. Of course, chicken litter comes from chicken farming. But there's no it's not an organic product. It's
Right.
it's just different.
So when are you looking at having any kind of supply of it ready for people?
Uh, Trucks are going to start shipping February 1st,
Okay.
and it's going to happen really quickly. So we produce 2 tractor trailer loads a day. So as far as what we have on the books right now is, in a week's time frame,
Yeah.
we're going to the masses.
So that kind of clears things up, and it gives me a little bit more information too, because I understood the basis of things, but I kind of wanted to get a little bit more information, and who's better than you actually sitting here, which is nice.
Yeah, it's not overly complicated what we're doing. It's just one of the big things is that we wanted to put as much into the prill as possible. We wanted to eliminate waste, so it's a zero waste manufacturing process. Mm-hmm. Anything that doesn't meet our specifications gets recycled back into the process, that was big for us. There's no wastewater. Everything we have on site stays on site and stays geared towards the benefit of the fertilizer.
Yeah, that's good.